This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 199. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hi there.
So, I feel like I need to preface this show a little bit that yesterday was the 4th year anniversary of AggroChat. And technically, by the time that you're listening to this, it will have been 2 days ago. But like Friday the 13th, 2018 was our we'd been recording for 4 years, and now we're moving into the 5th year.
Wow.
Madness.
And like, I think the only folks that were on that first show were me and Kodra and Ash and Ray, but Ray hasn't been around for a very, very long time. So yeah, no, I have listened to that show before, and it is I did not know what I was doing at all. Not that I really know what I'm doing now, but...
Do any of us really know what we're doing?
No.
Anybody really know what time it is?
Talking about stuff and things.
Yeah, no, we've done this a really long time. So, yeah, I found it weird, like, because I originally planned on, like, talking about it on Friday, and then Friday came, and I'm like, I knew I was supposed to be doing something, but I couldn't remember what it was, and then I looked at the calendar, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was our anniversary. So happy anniversary, everyone.
Yay.
Yay.
Hooray.
This is the tinfoil anniversary. I'll be wadding it up and throwing it your way.
That's a terrible anniversary.
It's versatile. You can do lots with tinfoil, which, I mean, technically is aluminum foil, but anyway. In the whole doing stupid things that I often do, I don't even know why, other than the fact that, like, I've been having somebody post on my blog with me talking about Project Gorgon and taking exception to some of the things I've said about Everquest being ancient and outdated, and so I'm like, well, you know, it had been since 2013 since I last poked my head in. So I downloaded the game, I installed it, and it's mostly EverQuest. Like, there's 30,000 expansions at this point. I rolled on Vox, which is a new server, but it's like classic rule set server. And what I mean by that is it's like all the expansions in play, not one of their weird limited time event servers.
It's got more different types of server than Magic the Gathering has formats.
It's true. Sadly, though, Magic the Gathering has put out way more expansions, but not by much. Like EverQuest. EverQuest has put out a lot of expansions at this point. I have to say, like, it is an old game. It is an ancient game. It still, for the most part, plays like it ever did, but they have made a lot of changes to it over the years to try and make it more modern. So whenever I originally played, I can remember, like, playing a Shadow Knight, which I often did, and that's what I rolled this time, was a horrible experience until around 10-ish, when you started to get a trickle of spells. They've tweaked the way hybrids work, so Paladin, Shadow Knight, Ranger, Beast Lord all start to get spells at level 1, so that you can do something other than just auto attack forever.
That's nice of them.
So that's kind of cool, and they've tweaked some of that, so it feels better to level. It's still mostly a very slow game that you could keep an entire conversation going while actively doing combat. But, man, I didn't expect the world out of it. I do have to say it has maybe the coolest tweak that I've seen to loot. And so they ended up shimming in a need-greed personal loot system. And for the most part, it's the standard fare except for you're given loot, don't loot, need, greed, and the need, greed options and the ignore options are permanent.
Huh.
So if you say, okay, I care about bone chips because I'm a Shadow Knight. Well, I don't care about spider leg. It will never prompt you to ever care about looting those again. But it will always automatically loot bone chips. And there's ways to tweak what you've said to ignore and to always loot. But just that concept, like, I like that. I used to run an add-on in WoW that did that.
But Bell, what if you didn't loot everything possible?
You know, the thing is like, I don't feel the need to loot it if I didn't know it existed in the first place. like if I can carefully prune out knowing that there was this thing that I'm never going to use that's not of any value, then I don't care. Like, I don't have to hit loot all. But if I know it's on the corpse, it bugs me. But yeah, no, so like I think that was kind of cool as a loot system. I wish other games gave me that option to forget that a thing exists on the body.
See, I disagree with this. Like, I must loot everything, even if it's useless. I would never click the option that said I don't ever want to see this again. I could do it.
Yeah, but, oh man, there's so little inventory space in these games. I would really appreciate that.
Well, I assume EverQuest still cares about weight, right?
EverQuest still cares about weight.
Including the weight of the money you're carrying.
Do you know what I ignore? All those damn bricks of bronze ore and iron ore. They're like twice as heavy as the weapon you make from them.
Yep.
So I'm playing a Troll Shadow Knight because I went with the min-maxi option. And Troll Region is broken as hell. And Slam will always be better than Bash and all that things. Like, I remembered all the things about building the Shadow Knight, and they're still all true. Dealing with trying to remember where I could actually go that I'm not kill on sight with has been weird. You don't drop a corpse when you die, so that's different. You just respawn back wherever the hell your bind is. So literally there is no reason other than binding to Plane of Knowledge ever. Because there are books that let you go around the world. You still have to sell things by standing in the bazaar. They've created buy orders.
Stand in the bazaar for you?
No. It has to be you. Or a secondary account that you're paying a subscription for. To make things even weirder, there are now buy order bots that you can turn yourself into. So, like, if you want to buy all the bone chips or, you know, all those frog legs or whatever, you can do that too. And you have to AFK yourself overnight to do it. So that's still screwed up. Like, that sequence of things is kind of screwed up. But you can apparently fill a buy order anywhere in the world without going to any NPCs. You just click on a menu and sell your stuff. Mudflation is real.
I am not surprised at all.
Like, oh my god, the economy is just gone. I remember when I played EverQuest, like 1,000 plat was a lot of money. It is not a lot of money anymore. Like, I bought my first Lamentation, which was a really damn good sword, in Greater Fey for 1,000 plat, and I thought that was a good deal. You can buy a token, like you can in WoW, and sell that on the server, and on most servers, those are worth 22 million platinum.
Good lord.
By the time I finished the newbie area, I had like 100 platinum. Just because, like, weapons now sell for like 4 or 5 plat a piece. Because everything had to be scaled up in the economy because it just ran away over time. So it's interesting, and it's like this weird trip down this memory lane as I'm going through all my old haunts. To make the game soloable, they just give you a mercenary now in the newbie area. So you can pick up a healer or a tank or whatever blends best with your class of choice. And it's super powerful. And it's charging you every 15 minutes for it being active, but you're making enough off selling weapons that it doesn't really matter. It's just weird. Like it's this weird experience of playing Project Gorgon a lot and then going back and playing the original EQ, and it's charming to some extent, but it is definitely not a game I would ever suggest to anyone.
Yeah.
This is only because I occasionally do play, Project 99 on an emulator server. It's weird the things that they've done to try and make the game playable in a world that no longer accepts force grouping 24/7.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I had completely forgotten about was just how insane aggro is in this game.
Yes.
Like, I had the bright idea to go into Guck, and within seconds I had pulled like 30 mobs.
Did you run a train to the zone?
I ran a train, but like nobody's in the lobby zone, so it's not like it matters. I trained the hell out of that zone, but it's entertaining.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember those days of making a mad scramble for the zone exit when that shout comes through.
yeah, I had completely forgotten that mobs in EQ never break free of you. They will chase you forever. Because I was trying to leash a mob. I'm like, oh, right, that doesn't exist in this game. And wound up running all the way across the zone to zone it into some other area just to drop the aggro. It's just weird to play something like this. And when I am now so ingrained to things are vastly different. It's entertaining, though. Like, I don't know why I'm playing it, but I'm enjoying myself. I am sure I won't play it for long. There's only so long nostalgia can, last. And I guess in a weird kind of nostalgia, we've been doing stuff in World of Warcraft that we refer to as Mythical Nonsense.
We have been doing some nonsense.
What's mythical nonsense?
It sounds like nonsense.
So, we never really pushed the Mythic Plus stuff that hard back in the day. Like, I think maybe we would get to, like, Mythic Plus 5 or 6, and that'd be about it. Like, that's as far as we usually got. Usually to the point where we started getting a single affix applied.
Yeah.
So there are groups that like are doing Mythic Plus 30s now, and it would be really cool to be able to get a Mythic Plus 15, which unlocks one of the weapon appearances,
and is one of the things that is going to be going away when the new expansion comes.
Yeah, it's one of those use it or lose it type things that WoW loves to do. So yeah, we were. I don't even like. I think Grace, you were the catalyst here because you wanted to do something sort of raidy, but not really raidy.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do something with friends, and our sort of leveling dungeon thing got broken, and so I figured that Mythic Plus dungeons only take 5 people. It should be somewhat realistic to put that together. So and we could pretend like we were doing something that was difficult, even though we weren't gonna take it seriously at all.
Well, and the funny thing is like at some point during this expansion, I mostly stopped playing my Alliance characters and have mostly played Horde characters. And in doing so, like all of my characters that are geared and reasonably and ready to do this nonsense are all Horde side. Horde side is also the place that like I have the least contacts. So I think we ended up I ended up making a post about it, and then a couple people responded on Twitter the next day that they would also be interested in this thing. So we picked up a tank and a mage, and then wound up grabbing Bix as our third person. And we've done 2 weeks of it now, and I think we left off after taking out a Mythic 10 plus last week.
Yeah, either 9 or 10. I don't remember.
So we're slowly working our way through the ranks, and that 10 was not super easy. Like, it was not a steamrolly thing. Mythic 0 is absolutely a steamrolly thing, because on our first night, we couldn't get 2 people logged in because there was some kind of a server issue happening with a lot of the servers. And like me and Grace and Bix, like 3-player the entire Mythic Zero, Mauve Souls.
Yep. Yeah, it was no trouble at all. Like, one of the bosses took, an extra minute. But that was it. It wasn't any deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think we still had like 15 minutes left on the timer, so we were not even close to running into time constraints. But once we started getting into Affix Land, yeah, no, they absolutely started ramping up in difficulty.
Yeah, although, I mean, like, it was much more difficult whichever one we left off with at the end, but we were also still motoring through it pretty fast, and with some of those fixes, if we had actually taken our time a little bit more, it would have been easier.
Right.
And we had tons of time, so, like, I think we're still in good shape to keep making progress, and I think we're pretty much at the point where stuff that drops out of the chest is actually potentially an upgrade too. So feels like I'm doing some sort of progression, even though it's not really. And like I think the Mythic Plus system is interesting and it can be pretty fun. I hate the timed thing. I wish it just ramped up in difficulty without the timer thing, because it adds a level of anxiety that's just annoying. And at least now, if you finish, you still get rewards. It's not as punitive as it was when Legion first launched. But I don't know. I don't like the timer thing.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it either. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Time Nightfalls either, which I found frustrating, and I think they eventually removed the timer, so it's just a timed content thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it stresses me out quite as much as it does you, but I still hate it. And it's still more stressful than it ought to be. And it's just not, like, that aspect of it that I don't enjoy. But, like, otherwise, as a mode of progression, as an alternate progression for smaller groups, as a source for gear that's sort of, perpendicular to the raid race, like, I think it's good. Like, my complaints about Mythic Plus are the timer and the fact that, you can't queue for it. And also, there's some profession quests and things that require you to run Mythic Zero. And, I mean, I've complained enough about the professions and the way they did the quests in this expansion. But the fact, basically, that those things require Mythic Zero, which you cannot queue for, even though it's not a plus. And no one ever runs those, because why would you run that? The rewards are crap when you could run the Mythic Plus and get better stuff. So it makes it hard later in the expansion. Like, at this point, I have some alts that I would like to finish up professions for, and it's just not even worth my time to try.
Well, I mean, and similarly, it kind of bugs me that, like, there's a lot of the quests that you just can't do in Mythic at all.
Yeah, that too.
Since, like, almost even worse at this point is going back and running heroics when it feels like you could potentially just solo the heroic.
But at least people still queue for those. Like, there's still, like, you can queue for those. There's still random heroic reward that is not completely useless. It gives you some of the currency that lets you buy legendaries.
I think it's a big problem that they've put so much emphasis on the mythics without having a dungeon finder option, because everything that I read about the group finder is that it brings out the absolute worst in humanity. That everyone has arbitrary, like, requirements that don't map at all to the difficulty of the content that they're running.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I did a little bit of using the group finder for Mythics back earlier on in the expansion. And, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that it's been since the dawn of Gear Score. People put ridiculous requirements on things. People are jerks. I mean, I don't know. I wish that, at least at this point in the expansion, also, regular mythics are so, obviously we did it with 3 people, that they really should be in the looking group tool. Like, you should be able to queue for those.
But, I mean, it'll be interesting, I think, to see how far we make it. I'm pretty hopeful that we'll get to 15 at this point.
Yeah, I think we have pretty good odds.
I think partially it also depends on, like, what keys we get.
Yeah, but, we have a few months, even before the, expansion pre-patch goes in and breaks things. So, like, I think we have plenty of time as long as we don't just get bored and wander away. Yeah,
exactly. So, prior to the show, we were talking a little bit about a topic that Kodra had come up with.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not entirely certain how to summarize this, but because we couldn't come up with like a really great way to pass this concept along, but basically a discussion of encounter design in games, namely multiplayer versus single player, and the games that do a great job of shifting back and forth between. So there's a quick summary. So Kodra, go for it.
Yeah, so I just finished. I beat Bloodborne this week, and I actually also beat Dark Souls 3. I was surprisingly right at the end of the game and didn't really realize it. But the reason this is coming up is because in Bloodborne 3, I had been stuck on a boss for a while, and finally just was like, alright, let's see what multiplayer in this game is like.
Wait a sec. Dark Souls 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Lothric fight was pretty much completely stymieing me, and I went back and attempted it solo with new having gained new skills. It still completely flattened me. And it's really fun doing some of those fights with some help, but in those fights, it's very obvious who the bosses are focusing their attacks, and their attacks are very, like, forward. They are attacking one player at once. And so this opens up this opportunity to, like, adjust your playstyle where whoever's getting attacked can play very defensively and sort of dodge around and try and evade, while the other person can actually get some hits in. And I was comparing that to Monster Hunter, where, at least with Monster Hunter World, the enemies don't seem to really, like... It's hard to tell who the enemy is focused on, and the enemy's attacks are very wide-ranging.
I feel like in Monster Hunter, there's one of the key differences is like, there doesn't seem to be a hate system. Like, there doesn't seem to be a system that is gluing a target to you through some artificial means. It's like it's constantly shifting back and forth between people, and I do think there's code that's like, are they drinking? Are they sharpening?
Yeah. Like if they see you trying to sharpen your weapon, they're going to come and try and stop you doing that thing.
Monster Hunter World did decide to ditch a skill called Provoker that was in the previous ones, which would make monsters focus more on you.
Now, this is kind of where I'm curious, because the other thing that happens in Monster Hunter World is the monster might not actually be fighting a player. It could be fighting another monster. And just being close to these two monsters fighting can be very dangerous, because there's a lot of collateral damage to their attacks. In other games, were monsters more like straightforwardly targeting someone, though? Because I know... No, they aren't?
Monster Hunter has sort of always been designed to be a multiplayer game from the start.
Mm-hmm.
So monsters have big attacks. They can hit more than one person at a time, even if they're not explicitly aiming for you.
Okay.
Yeah, what I've played of like older Monster Hunter games, it feels like a lower fidelity version of Monster Hunter World, but like all of the things seem to be represented there, not just, or at least most of the things, like, you know, monsters running and having to go find them again. Things like Pickle charging in and attacking you while you're attacking a monster.
That was a different thing, though. Monsters in previous games just wouldn't fight each other. If there was more than one monster, they're all fighting you.
But I kind of love the fact that, like, there's a pecking order and they fight each other, and they'll favor their home turf. Like when they run away, it seems like they go towards their home turf.
Yeah. So one of the things that frustrates me with Monster Hunter World is that oftentimes it feels like playing in multiplayer, adding people to your team, is not actually like necessarily making the fight easier for you. Like by their design, like if it is a multiplayer fight, we're gonna ramp up the difficulty, and then like 2 people might not be better than 1, and 3 people are probably not better than 2, and really like even at 4 people, it's one of those things where you don't get more feints to a fight, so it's sort of a questionable of like how good of an idea is it for me to even try and play with other people in this game.
I think I'm the weirdo that enjoys it.
I don't entirely agree with that assessment.
Okay.
So to start with, when you join a multiplayer, when a quest goes into multiplayer mode in Monster Hunter World, the monster gets about something like 2.5 times as much health. If there are 3 people or 4 people, you lose your Palicos. But even though we already just said monsters don't explicitly go after one person, it is much easier to attack a monster if it is trying to hit someone who isn't you than if it's trying to hit you.
Okay.
Just having that ability to, wait for the monster to focus on somebody else and then be able to go after it from the sides or the back.
Maybe I can finish my spirit combo now because it's not swinging in my direction explicitly.
And I think that's a big reason why I enjoy multiplayer so much in Monster Hunter World, is it allows me to focus on doing the things a longsword does, rather than constantly trying to duck aggro and get it back on the Palico.
Previous games had this distinction, but it wasn't as visible because there was a sharp divide between single-player quests and multiplayer quests. You access them from different areas even. You could go into multiplayer quest with 1 person and have 2 base damage.
And I absolutely made a mistake of doing this thing.
I did it intentionally a few times in Generations, because you can get access to some monsters that way sooner than you can through the single player. But it's kind of a slog.
Yeah, I was doing it in Generations just because, like, they hadn't given me any real monster hunts yet, so I just, okay, well, they're giving me one here, let's try it. And I did not realize that it did not follow the rules I am used to in Monster Hunter World.
I did really appreciate the ability to just say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this fight, and suddenly be able to be like, okay, let's just bring a friend in, and that, I mean, it definitely made the fight even remotely reasonable for me.
In Monster Hunter or in
Dark Souls?
Dark Souls.
Dark Souls, that scaling doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's no scaling to adding another player.
And really, those boss fights are designed for 1 person. So you still get the benefits Monster Hunter World has, where maybe this is going after the other person, and none of the drawbacks.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say, especially for Lothric, I still felt pretty accomplished after that guy died. Like, it's a good safety valve for, I literally have spent probably 30 attempts on this guy. Let me get somebody else in here. Like, I have cycled through several different strategies. I've only ever been able to get his first phase down, which is like the first third of the fight. Let me get somebody else in here.
Having never done multiplayer in a Dark Souls game, how smoothly does that interface work? Like, is it you just like literally invite somebody via the interface and they show up, or?
Like so much in that game, somebody leaves a message on the ground. Normally the messages are, you can read them, but some are summoning messages, which lets you just summon that person into your session.
So does that message only show up for a specific person, or?
No, well, it depends on how you're doing it. I'm pretty sure you can do some like targeted grouping with certain items, but for the most part, it shows up globally.
Yeah, I've seen all those messages, and honestly, like, it's kind of one of the most annoying things about Dark Souls or Bloodborne is how littered the world is with messages.
Well, if you... it's slightly different in Bloodborne. I don't actually know how you group up in Bloodborne. I'm sure you ring some sort of resonant bell. But in Dark Souls, you have to spend one of your resources that, like, either restores your humanity or restores your ember or whatever the mechanic is in the specific game you're playing. And then at that point, you're able to summon people into your session. And if there's no one online, there's typically some NPCs around that you can summon.
I mean, do the fights still mechanically stand up with multiple people, or is it just diluting the difficulty at that point?
I mean, it's definitely diluting the difficulty. But, like, Dark Souls is a really hard game. I feel like it's okay. I am not offended by things that dilute the difficulty of Dark Souls, I guess is how I would put that.
I mean, to some extent, I guess multiplayer in Monster Hunter World is also diluting the difficulty, because instead of having to deal with the nonsense all the time, you're having to deal with the nonsense like a quarter of the time. But I guess, like, in that game, I feel like I always still have to be at the ready and prepared for the aggro to shift back to me, and then I'll have to deal with it. Or at least, aggro in that game isn't sticky enough that I feel like I can really just go full bore and ignore the fact that, like, any minute I'm probably going to have to deal with the fact the monster's coming right back to me.
Right. Yeah, even if the monster's not looking at you, you don't want to do something with an extremely long animation at the wrong time.
I want Provoker back.
Like, the only real time that I feel completely safe just opening up is if it's been knocked down or if it's been stunned.
Mm-hmm.
They'll call the Challenger Mantle, which causes monsters to attack specifically you, but it goes away if you're hit. So I don't know what they were thinking with it, really.
Oh.
Well, especially since it takes so long for that to recycle. Like, it's not like a taunt. Like, if you could use it as a taunt to bounce
like
back.
A taunt.
Well, it is, but it's a taunt that works once and then can only be used, 3 minutes later? 4 minutes later? Whatever? Yeah. So I guess if you just absolutely need to save someone from a thing that's running at them, you can throw it up. But in being limited to having only 2 tools, that is not one that I'm going to take.
You could use it to lead monsters into traps or things like that.
You could. Or, you could just have the players run to the trap. But
if there's that one person who refuses to run to the trap.
I know, like, since I'm Captain SOS Roulette, I fully am aware that, like, there's been numerous times you've been on voice with me when I'm grumbling that someone just ignored the fact that I dropped a trap. Or specifically led the mob away from the trap.
It also apparently works to lead monsters into other areas, even when they're not enraged. So there's that.
So you could pull Nurgi out of the horrible areas.
You could.
Into a less horrible area. But then again, stunning a normal mob that's not immune to stun as they're trying to run tends to keep them in the area. So there are sort of ways to do that.
Flashbots are great.
I wish you could hold more than 3.
You can also hold 10 flash bugs.
Mm-hmm. I made use of this the first time I fought Kashaladora.
I maybe need to do this thing.
Really useful.
Like, I always wondered how so many people had so many of them.
You can functionally carry 13 into the quest.
But I do feel like Monster Hunter World is one of those cases where, because of the way that the encounter behaves, that it scales really well with multiple people, or not even the encounter scales by itself. It just becomes a slightly different encounter, but also one that's equally difficult and equally fun. And I wish I could explain why I tend to jump into SOS Roulette more often than anything if I need to do something.
I mean, we've already established that you're the patron saint of the choices.
I mean, I know. Like, we already talked this show about me doing questionable things. Like, it's a trend. It's a thing I do. I don't know. Like, it seems like there's less friction that if I hop into another group that's already in progress than starting my own group. I don't know. So we've talked about 2 specific examples of games that kind of do this thing. Are there any others that we can think of? Because, like, I'm kind of drawing a blank. Like, Destiny, for example, has either single-player content or multiplayer content, and they don't interact at all.
Never between them shall they meet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's one or the other. I mean, in MMOs, once you overlevel content, you end up, like, being able to solo it, but that's absolutely not intended either.
Yeah, I mean, traditional MMOs are definitely a different beast from this sort of thing because they specifically have content that is intended for solo or group. It's not as flexible.
But I always liked the concept of having content that scaled in a reasonable manner as you added more people. Like, because sometimes I don't want a group. Like, sometimes I just want to solo things. Other times, I just want a group. And kind of resent when I can't do a thing with whoever happens to be there with me at the same time. I've never really seen a game that does that in truth. That, like, you can take this thing and scale it by as many people as you choose to join in. And I know there's a lot of technical difficulties and reasons why, but I still think it would be interesting.
It seems extremely difficult to scale things like that, especially in any game that has defined roles, because at what number of players do you need another healer?
Well, yeah, that's, I mean, you end up with problems like in the early days of flexible rating in WoW, where, you know, you were, even though it was supposed to be flexible and bring as many people as you have, in reality, there were breakpoints where it was not worth bringing an extra person, or it was actively bad to bring an extra person as opposed to, you know, being below that breakpoint in terms of the difficulty. You know, it's spawning extra ads. You know, oh, if we have one more person, we're going to have 5 more ads.
And that was especially bad on encounters that, like, once you pass that threshold, you got a new mini-boss to deal with during the encounter. Like, you need another tank to make this thing work now. I feel like a game like Guild Wars 2 and the way its group content largely functions would maybe work with scaling like that. In that, sure, there are roles to be played, but you don't necessarily have to have a specific set of roles to make the encounters work. I mean, because for as much as I've railed against that game in the past, I do feel like it does a pretty good job of now, after several iterations, presenting a somewhat role-less type gameplay. Well, not that there aren't roles, it's more role agnostic. Like, you can blend a different set of roles together for each group.
Its open world content has done a much better job of facilitating that sort of thing. It has raid content where I'll admit I have not done, but looking into it, it would appear that his group composition more inflexible than any other game I've heard of.
Which game?
Guild Wars 2.
Oh.
Because
I know nothing about its raid comp.
You need 2 chronomancers, one for each group, to make sure that group has all the boons and keep alacrity up. And you need a ranger for each group, because rangers are the best healers. You need a tank, which can be one of several things. You need someone to provide 25 stacks of might, again, in each group. This is probably a warrior. And then you have 2 other people. And that's a ridiculous ask for a 10-person raid.
Right. That's back to the days of WoW when you were making sure that you had every possible buff covered.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so maybe Guild Wars 2 isn't a great example. Just maybe. In its non-serious,
it isn't.
Yeah, in its non-serious content, like, it feels like we've been able to throw any combination of things together and just do stuff.
That's a shame.
I'm seriously hoping in Guild Wars 2 that, like, guild halls don't decay over time.
They don't.
Because I haven't been back playing much.
Yeah, well, maybe one day we'll all feel the urge and jump back in and be able to continue progressing it.
I mean, I'm sure it will happen at some point. I seem to be the king of going back and reliving games that I've played in the past, so, I mean, there's always room for Jello.
Their story content gets better and better every time I play it. Every new piece of story content is a noticeable improvement over the last, to the point where I really enjoyed some of their more recent storytelling.
I honestly could not tell you where I left off in the story.
It's a real pity that Living Story Season 1 is just a big pity.
Oh.
Like, full stop, it's just a big pity because, I mean, we've talked about it for so many reasons, but, like, after everything Living Story Season 2 and onward is really good. Like, they learned that their first characters were kind of butts, and
They kept the one that wasn't Butts.
Right. They kept the
Yeah.
one that wasn't Butts. They made him more interesting. They gave him a character arc.
And shuffled the rest of them off in various ways. And gave us a new set of characters that we actually like.
Yeah, and like, what?
Will apparently do voice acting,
It's true.
so it probably pays to keep him.
But yeah, among other things, I am still sad that I will never actually get to play through meeting those new characters.
Yeah, and there's enough interesting going on in those stories that you get a really good sense of them. I mean, there's some really touching moments that I get to once I played enough of that prologue to understand like what's going on. And like some of the stuff that happens in the post Heart of Thorns story content leading up to, I don't remember, Path of Fire is heartbreaking. It's great. There's some really, really like great story moments there.
It just makes me wonder is there any way for them to recreate that content?
Not
It's
effectively.
non-instanced, so not really.
Yeah.
Like it's why there's a big giant crater in one of the human starter areas now, because they didn't instance any of it.
I mean, I think that's a general problem, and honestly, ties back to the reason why we're doing the whole Mythic Plus thing. Is like, I really hate when MMOs remove chunks of its content because time moved on, and it honestly like tarnishes my desire to some extent to do things. Not necessarily in the case of Guild Wars 2, just it's like friction that I have to get past. I have to somehow accept that there's stuff that I'll never be able to do because for whatever reason they decided to drop it from the game entirely.
I think I definitely prefer the FF14 approach here.
Yeah.
In most cases, it is far easier to do something after some amount of time has gone by.
Right.
Like mounts, the primal mounts were originally a kind of status symbol because they dropped at a rate of LOL off of fights that were fairly difficult. And as levels have gone up, those fights have gotten less difficult. But they also buffed the drop rates. So if you want to go back and get them now, it's easier.
Well, I think the key difference there is they've done a really good job of continuing to create new bars for people to go out and achieve if they want to feel like they have something that no one else has.
Without taking anything away.
Right. Yeah, it's like, we did this thing when it was fresh and new, and man, it was awesome, but you can also have nice things. Like, I don't know, there's so much of traditional MMO design that is this zero-sum game that some people can have this thing and other people can't, and it kind of bugs me, I guess. And, I mean, limited time events are another thing that just annoy me, especially if I know that said limited time event isn't coming back around. And even then, Final Fantasy XIV has arrived at a point with that where I feel okay about it. Sure, I can't do an event after the year it's first available, but if there was something really cool from that event that I didn't get when it was around, they're offering it on the Mog Station store, so I can pony up some cash to get the thing that I really, really, really wished I was around for getting. But I guess for me, there's nothing more disheartening when I see something in the world that's really cool and I do the research to figure out where that even came from, and in whatever item database I'm looking at, there's the word, not still in, or not available in game, or removed from game, because I know, like, that's not a thing I'll ever be able to get. So, I don't know, like, I have an almost why even bother moment, and I have to, like, pull myself out of that and find new purpose in whatever the hell I was doing before. And that may just be a me thing, but...
No, I have that too.
Yep, me too. And sometimes, I mean, it's bad enough that I then get the why bother syndrome with everything in the game. There's just one cool thing that I know that I can't go back and get, or something that I can't go back and experience, then, like, well why bother? Which is silly, but it's still something I have to overcome.
But it just tarnishes it, because you realize that no amount of effort or time or work will ever get you over that one little hurdle that you decided was really cool and wished you could have? I feel like that topic just veered well off its original course. So, do we have anything else that happened this week or related that might want to talk about?
Speaking of Monster Hunter, the MegaMan event went live. And you should do it so you can hear ridiculous 8-bit MegaMan soundtrack while playing Monster Hunter.
So does the MegaMan music only play in
It only plays in the quest.
MegaMan? Okay, in the MegaMan quest.
It does not play.
I had hoped maybe that
MegaMan, sadly.
Yeah, that was what I was hoping for. That I could dress up my Palico's MegaMan and just have MegaMan music.
Okay,
I feel
so
like eventually it would get boring hearing Wily Castle Stage 1. Eventually.
Well, I mean, then I can just put them in different Palico clothes.
Or switch weapons.
okay, so
Yeah, that too.
the other day when you were posting this, I feel like I somehow missed something about how you get all the different backgrounds. Because I have now killed that event with 3 different weapons and still only have the one background.
There's only the one background. That's the music that plays during the quest.
Ah, okay.
Depends on which weapon you're using.
Okay, I misunderstood it. I thought there were backgrounds for each of those things.
No, that fun, amazing arcade background you get is the only one, but it is amazing.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly, I got exceptionally lucky. My first 2 times in, I got a single ticket, and my 3rd time, I got 3 tickets.
That's all you need. What, 3 for the armor, 2 for the weapon?
Yeah, but my god, mounting the tiny Odogaron is nonsense.
Everything else, like he's normal. He attacks like a normal one, except he's minuscule.
And it's very hard for multiple people to be attacking it at the same time because you're just straight up interfering with each other. Like, not even. Like, there's nothing you can do.
Tree one is your friend.
And it seems like full spoilers for Dominaria are out at this point.
Yeah.
That's something that happened this past week.
There was the pre-release that happened. It looks grindy.
Grindy?
It looks incredibly grindy.
What
Like,
do you mean by that in terms of a Magic set?
in terms of a draft set, it means that your games are going to go long. You're going to get into a bunch of board stalls and try and figure out how to get out of them.
Yeah, I guess that's the kind of Magic I enjoy, is the ones that take
I'd
a while to play.
I mean, if it's a set taking us back to Dominaria, then it makes sense that it would take us back to longer games.
I don't know. It looks good. It looks nostalgic, so I ended up ordering a box. The Challenger decks have also started appearing in stores, but like most of them are all sold out. It seems like the green-black Counter Surge one is the only one I've actually seen in a store.
With them, we can kiss dual decks goodbye.
Yes. I mean, it's honestly something that makes a little bit more sense, I think, because
It's
they
sort
kind
of taking us back to the older days
right.
of, hey, here's a starter deck, except this is actually good.
Yeah, I mean, like, these are all things that would serve as an entry point to play Standard. In fact, like, I think Hazoret, Red, and the Vehicle Rush one, like, are in point decks that were actually being played and did well, like, a weekend before they released. Admittedly, like, there's a few card swaps here and there, but, like, they would be largely playable as is. And that's probably why a lot of those decks, I guess, are just not findable in stores. The price points, I don't know, is kind of expensive, but I want to say they're like $35 MSRP, which compared to the alternate of just ordering the cards is probably about what they would cost, but...
With the new decks?
Yeah, the Challenger decks.
Those decks are all, like, $30 or $35 is way under their actual price.
Yeah.
Like, most of those decks are like $90 worth of cards, so it's going to be fun trying to find those.
Yeah. What I mean is, like, those are also showing up in, like, Walmart and Target and places like that, and I think the $35 price point is probably too much for that kind of retailer, even though, for the moment, people are snapping them up just to get cards to break open and do other things with. And I guess my confusion is, like, are they reprint decks, or did they pull the cards out of back stock?
Oh, I think they're just printing new sheets with those specific cards on them.
Which in theory should push down the price of those cards with more in circulation.
I haven't looked at what's in those decks, but maybe not.
Well, like, so the Vehicle Rush has a full playset of, Heart of Kirin?
Yeah.
Which is like a mythic from Kaladesh, which at one point was like up to a $15 to $20 mythic.
Yeah, no.
It's still $20.
I don't. Does it have a full playset of Heart of Kirin's?
Yes, it has a full set of Heart of Kirin.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, no, like these look good. I kind of want to get all of them just to have as play decks for the office.
Like, those decks are solid. They were designed to be something that you can take to Friday Night Magic, sit down, play, and potentially win with.
I mean, I think it's a good move because right now, or up until this point, like anything that you could buy that was a deck did not at all represent something that was actually playable other than just casually. Probably the only negative is since those decks rely so heavily on Kaladesh and Aether Revolt and the Amonkhet block, as of this summer, those will no be standard legal?
Mm-hmm.
Is it summer or is it fall?
I'm not
I don't actually know.
But
it's whenever the set after Dominaria.
It's a decent amount of time, actually.
It's fall.
Okay. Anyway, those are all the things I know about that happened this week. We have anything else before we wrap things up?
I think we're good.
Yep.
Well, as always, thanks for tuning in and listening to the show. And we will be back next week with another normal show. And we will see you then. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.